When it comes to eliminating debt, there's two fairly popular ideas out there of how to do that. There is the Dave Ramsey method, which you probably have heard of for quite a long time, actually. And then there's this thing called the FIRE movement, which we are part of. And so in today's video, what I'm going to go over is the difference between the two. We have spent time in both communities, and there's pros and cons to each. And so we're going to talk about today the differences between the two, and you'll hear who I think is the better of the two. So hang tight for about 6 seconds, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to the House of FI. I am Wendy, and if you are new here, welcome to our house. We are glad you are here. We are all about helping moms and dads on the road to financial independence save more, spend less, and build wealth while they're on their journey to financial independence. So, what we're talking about today is Dave Ramsey versus the FIRE movement. We have spent some major time in both of those communities, and in fact, if you have not heard us speak of our experience with Dave Ramsey before, I actually used to lead Dave Ramsey's classes called Financial Peace University in one of my former churches that I attended. So I do know this in and out, and Dave Ramsey is the first person or school of thought or method that we really took hold of to make an attempt to change our finances. But we kind of backslid over the years and would try it again and fall off the wagon and try it again and fall off the wagon. And there were some major roadblocks for us, and I'll talk about those later, and why we ultimately, I think, have found more success with the FIRE movement. But first, let's get into what each one is all about. If you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, you're also familiar with what he calls the baby steps. Dave Ramsey's baby steps are: first, build an emergency fund of $1,000. Next, pay off debt with gazelle intensity. And when you're paying off debt, you're paying off everything except the mortgage using his debt snowball method. Then in baby step 3, you're going to build 3 to 6 months of your expenses for an emergency fund. Step 4, once you've accomplished that, then you're going to invest 15% into your retirement accounts. Baby step 5 is to invest in college funds for your children. Baby step 6 is to focus on paying off your house. And then the final step is step 7, to give to others and build wealth. Now, all of those are good things. I'm not going to say that they're not good things. All of those are good things. And for many, I think that starting with Dave Ramsey is really a good way to go, especially if you really don't have a foundation. He will help give you a solid foundation. But what I think it's important to know is that what Dave Ramsey's method or philosophy really focuses on is, 1, paying off debt. Awesome, love that, that's great. Focusing on the baby steps in a lockstep fashion. And when you're paying off debt, it's also paying off your mortgage. And so when he says all debt, he means all debt, zero debt. But there's really not a whole lot of focus after that of the how and the why. How do we invest? Why do we invest? How much do we invest? So those are really the core things that he's focusing on, is paying off debt, including your house, and then start saving money. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot of help there. Now, that's very, very different from the FIRE community. We found the FIRE community about 3 years or so ago, and we were in $1 million worth of debt. We knew Dave Ramsey in and out, but it really felt like an impossibility. And at the time, we were both 46 and 47, and I knew the baby steps, I knew them inside and out, and what was a roadblock for me was paying off your debt before you save. So it had been a mental barrier for me to save any kind of money for my retirement, because in my mind, I was going against what Dave Ramsey said. It's not his fault. The debt that we created is our fault. I'm not blaming him at all. I'm just saying that I wish I had known another way before that. So we found the FIRE community, and it was a light bulb moment for us. And what's cool about the FIRE community is that, unlike Dave Ramsey's Baby Step, it is not a lockstep process. Whereas Dave Ramsey, you have the baby steps, you follow them in order. The FIRE movement is more, there are a bunch of core principles, and you take as many of those that fit with your lifestyle, and you put them together with what works for you and brings you joy and brings value to your life. The FIRE movement is also not espoused by just one person. It began actually many, many years ago with Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez. And they wrote this really before there even was a FIRE movement. And the key takeaway from that book was the realization that, sorry, my dog is barking. He's always barking. There's probably an Amazon package at the door or something. But it's this principle that your money equals time, or your time equals money. So, if something costs $100 and you make, $10 an hour at work, it takes you more than one whole day to pay for that item. So connecting this time and money thing was a way to get people to understand and value their money more, that if they could make more money and save more money, it would reduce the amount of time that they had to do that. But along the way, the movement has kind of picked up steam, and there's been several others along the way that have kind of brought this idea mainstream, and they've added their own kind of flavor. There are people who look to Mr. Money Mustache, who is uber frugal and focuses a lot on like sustainability and that sort of thing. And so a lot of people go to his school of thought under the FI umbrella. Other popular people in the community are people like the Frugal Woods and J.L. Collins, who's written one of the best books you'll ever find on investing that aligns with the financial independence community. It's a book called The Simple Path to Wealth, and I'm going to link that below, as well as Vicki Robin's book, because they're both phenomenal. And then really the one place that kind of really got me on board with the FIRE community was the Choose FI guys, Brad and Jonathan. They have really, really brought this movement to the mainstream. And so I think what you'll find if you go to each one of these different sources is you're not going to find any one of them that says this is what we do to reach financial independence. What I think you're going to find is that there are a whole bunch of different things that each one of them does. And I've put them into what I call the 6 tenets of FIRE. I'm not gonna go over them really in depth. I'll link down below. We did a video on what the 6 tenets of FIRE are, and did a series on what they are. So it's not a lockstep process. To sum them up, the key principles are: number 1, a rejection of consumerism. So not keeping up with the Joneses, not necessarily buying every gadget that you want, but maybe finding a way to get it at a discount. A frugality, but not a stinginess, and not so frugal that you live a meager existence, but frugality in the sense that you realize that I want to be financially independent more than I want cable. So those sorts of things. A rejection of consumerism is number 1. Number 2 is redefining what retirement looks like. So the normal retirement age is 65 to 70, and I think that number is getting older and older as we realize that people are not saving money and that Social Security is not enough. But traditionally it was between 65 and 70. And in the FIRE movement, that's kind of really out the window. And when you retire and what age you retire really depends on what you want for your life. For us, that means retiring early. We hope to retire at age 55. But for others, that might mean 40, it might mean 30. And they do that by incorporating the fourth strategy, and I'll get back to the third in just a second, but the fourth one, which is increasing your savings rate dramatically. You'll find that Dave Ramsey recommends 15%, and if you're part of the FIRE community, that might be a good starting point, but you're really seeking to do a much more aggressive savings rate. When we started, we were between 5 and 7% savings rate, and we were only doing what we were required to do by the state pension for Curtis. And now we're up to about 30%. But there's others in the community that are 40, 50, 70%. So it's really focusing on increasing that savings rate. The third one that I skipped over is tax optimization. So you're really taking advantage of the tax code and legally reducing your tax liabilities. So doing things like investing as much pre-tax dollars as you can so your taxable income goes down, taking advantage in your withdrawal strategies of things like the Roth conversion ladder. There's a whole bunch of different strategies, and again, you can watch the video that we recorded about that, where we also include a whole bunch of different resources to go over some of those things like a health savings account, your child's 529, how you can use all of these vehicles to help reduce your tax liability. The fifth tenet is community. Dave Ramsey absolutely has his own community, and there are people who are diehard Ramsey fans, and if you say anything against Dave Ramsey, they get kind of like really mad about it. And in fact, if you say anything negative like on Twitter, Dave Ramsey will block you. So don't do that. Don't get yourself blocked, because we still love Dave Ramsey. But community for the FIRE movement, it goes one step beyond that. It's really about bringing everyone in, this philosophy that we all can win with our money. The free sharing of information, of mentoring, of creating local meetup groups. That's here in San Diego. I'm one of the founding members of our San Diego meetup groups, and it has exploded. We started off with like maybe 10 to 12 people, and now we're in multiple hundreds of people, and it's just incredible to meet with people who are like-minded, because this really is different. It's different than everything that you've heard of before out there, and people aren't going to get it. People are going to be like, why on earth are you saving half of your income? Like, you're not going to retire early. People just don't get it. So that's okay, because we have our friends that we have found in the financial independence community that absolutely get it and are there and are going to encourage you and not sabotage your progress. Communities, the fifth one. The sixth final tenet is kind of a catch-all. It's really taking into account life optimization strategies that will help you save more, spend less, build wealth, but also lead a joy-filled life. So things like house hacking, finding ways to reduce your biggest cost out there, which is your housing expense, or credit card hacking, where you're taking advantage of your credit cards and maybe putting all of your monthly expenses on those to get the travel miles, and then you travel places for free. Doing things to help the environment in a sustainable way, but also help your pocketbook, like growing food, biking to work. Oh, there's just so many things. It's all about how can I make my life better, but also save money and make it more convenient at the same time. So those are some of the core principles. There's probably more, and I've really tried to put them in a way that just about anything else you can think of should fall under one of those 6 tenets. But I'm always looking for more. So if you think I forgot one, put it below and we can talk about it and see, where do we think it falls? Do we need to add another tenet or what? Really what it all boils down to is to save as much money as you can, reduce your expenses as much as you can, increase your wealth or your passive income as quickly as you can, so that you have the choice to live life the way that you want to live it, Now, whether that is retiring early, whether that is leaving generational wealth to your children, whether that is, really pursuing a passion that you maybe couldn't afford to pursue before because you were tied to the six-figure job. That's really the heart and the core of the financial independence community. There's two ways to achieve financial independence and technically hit your FI number. You'll hear that a lot in the FI community, and all it boils down to, or all that means, is you have saved 25 times your annual expenses, and you have that invested somewhere, safe, index funds, low-cost index funds, or in other comparable vehicles of your choosing, and you live off of that when you're set to retire. And it should, based on the historical returns of the stock market, provide you income that will last you in perpetuity. That philosophy, or that idea, is based upon the Trinity study, which I'll link that below, which did mathematical equations and looked at probabilities of success over a period of time. And that's really what they came to, that if you save 25 times your annual expenses, you could withdraw 4% of that every single year to live on, and you would never run out of money. Some people suggest that you go lower than that. Some people say, you just kind of fluctuate as needed. There's a whole bunch of different strategies out there to execute that, and you really just have to educate yourself and figure out which one works best for you. We, though, are not going that route. What we are doing, because there is another way. The other way is to build enough passive income in other investments to bring in enough monthly income to provide for you in retirement. So it's the same, but it's using a different vehicle. So for us, that is our rental properties. The other vehicle that we are going to be using is our index funds, but also business income. So we're taking those three things together. We have a monthly number in mind of what we want to earn, and when we have created that much monthly income, we will be financially independent. And if you want to watch our video that we talked about our strategy, I'll link that down below as well. I talk about how we plan to retire in 5 years and lay that strategy out for you. Some people don't want to invest in real estate. They just want to know I've reached my number, and that's totally okay. That's the great thing about the financial independence community, is that it is all based upon what works for your lifestyle, your risk tolerance, your individual circumstances regarding debt. So pick and choose what works for you. Now, really quick, I'm just going to recap why we opted for the FIRE community as opposed to the Dave Ramsey's method. As I said in the beginning, I think Dave Ramsey's method is excellent as a starting point, but it really falls short in the latter part, the latter stages, the investing stages, and the creating wealth. But there are some other pitfalls, I think, that are present, and I've already mentioned one of those, and that was this roadblock of you must complete step 1 before you complete step 2. So no investing in retirement until you've paid off all your debt. For me, that does not work, and I would not recommend that to anyone, especially they're older. But also if they have a larger amount of debt. If you cannot pay off your debt quickly in maybe 1-2 years, you should not stop investing in your retirement. You should do both at the same time, and especially if you get a company match in your 401k. If you have a lot of debt and it's going to take you a long time, don't stop putting into your retirement. You can never get that time back, and every single year works to your advantage to building that wealth via compound interest. So, point 1 that I disagree with. Point 2 that I disagree with is the baby emergency fund. I just don't think $1,000 is enough. We are in the middle of a pandemic when I am recording this, and I think more than any other example that I can give you, I think this pandemic has driven home the principle that $1,000 is not enough. We have been under month 7 now of quarantine, and there are people without jobs, people who have reduced their incomes, parents like me who have to stay home with their children, and having just $1,000 is not enough. So I think really the smarter thing to do is to save as much as you can, whether that's 3 months, 6 months, if you're self-employed, maybe even 24 months. The point is just to save as much money as you can as your emergency fund and keep it in a safe place. A money market account, you're not going to be putting that into an index fund, but you're going to be putting it into an account you can access relatively quickly. The third point of contention that I have is that he really says your credit score doesn't matter, and we know that in this day and age your credit score does matter. And so even though he says to swear off debt, and because you don't have any debt you're not going to need credit, that's not necessarily true. Not everybody wants to own a home, and if you have to rent, they check your credit score. Some jobs check your credit score. There's professions that check your credit score, like a lawyer. I undertook the character and fitness, and they want to know that you have good credit. So your credit score does matter. What's on your credit report does matter. The fourth, fifth, whatever. The next kind of area of disagreement is credit cards. He vehemently opposes credit cards, and I do too if you are not either in a position to pay it off every single month, or you just don't have the willpower or the restraint to do that. If you don't have either one of those two, if you can't pay it off every single month, you should not use your credit card. But if you do have that discipline to do that, to pay it off every single month, I think it's perfectly okay to take advantage of either cashback rewards or travel rewards. You can get a ton of either money back, or you can travel for free, which is just crazy. That's awesome. Who wouldn't want to take advantage of that? The FIRE community also doesn't necessarily do an envelope system. It's really kind of just what you want. Dave Ramsey really talks about using an envelope system. You're paying for everything in cash, and I agree. The philosophy is that it is harder to spend cash, that it's much easier to swipe your debit or credit card. There's studies that show that you will spend more money if you use one of those two. I don't like spending cash because that really doesn't work for me. I think I spend my cash, but also I really like my apps for tracking in my budget, and they make it so easy to just categorize things. And so if I do cash, I have to go back in and manually do it, and it's just a pain for me. I want simple, and so for me, I don't use an envelope system, but you certainly can if that works for you. And I'm going to be doing a upcoming video soon about using the cash envelope system. We did use it for quite a while. All right, and then one of the bigger points is Dave Ramsey really talks about paying off your mortgage early. And I think sometimes that makes sense, but sometimes it doesn't. You really have to look at your own situation and decide if not having a mortgage payment brings you peace. If it brings you peace, if it gives you comfort to know that you own your own home and that no matter what, you're always going to have a home, absolutely pay it off. But if you're able to secure your home at a very low interest rate, it might make more sense to take whatever extra you were going to put on your mortgage payment and put it in low cost index funds. It might make mathematical sense to do that as opposed to paying off your mortgage early. So you have to really consider which of the two works best for you. Or you can be like us and not have a mortgage at all because we rent. We live in a high cost of living area, and it really did not make sense to keep our house, so we sold it and we now rent, and we're paying much less every single month, and we're taking that extra money and we're putting it into our financial independence journey. So And then finally, I've already mentioned this one, and that is Dave Ramsey doesn't really give a whole lot of direction on what to do with your investments. He basically says build wealth and give. Well, what do I do? The financial independence community, the favorite of the financial independence community is low cost index funds. And the reason is you can do it yourself. You don't have to pay to have them professionally managed and have, 2% of your wealth going straight to your manager. You can do it yourself. We do it ourselves. It's something that you can learn, and I think the best starting place for you to kind of put your toe into what index funds are all about is to read J.L. Collins' book, The Simple Path to Wealth. Life-changing, not kidding. He wrote it for his daughter. It's easy to read. It's not complicated. You will love it. All right, guys, I feel like I've been talking for a really, really long time, but I really and I'm saying really an awful lot, but I can't help it. I'm from California, so I say that and like a lot. But I'm so glad you were here. I hope that you got a lot out of this video, and please come back next week. And if you are new to the financial independence community, join my Facebook group. I would love to have you there. I would love to be a support and encouragement to you. That is linked down below as well. And please subscribe, because we want to build this community and we want to lock arms with you and build wealth together. All right, guys, take care. Bye.